thing that was interesting in the Springtide research was what is happening in young people's faith, because of course we've got this background of nuns, and now that says that, yeah, well, they're all leaving, and so, the ship has fallen apart. What Springtide said was young people's faith isn't exactly absent. It's not quite true that they're nuns, right? What's happening is their faith is unbundled, is the word that they use. And what that means is what being religious looks like today for young people, for our teenagers and our young adults. What being religious looks like is fundamentally changing, right? How I am religious looks very different from how my parents are religious, and certainly how my grandparents were religious, and probably how my youth leaders are religious. So the question is that a threat or an opportunity for the church? So if you have read any sociology on faith development, you know that I call this the religious identity cocktail. Three pieces are part, if you're trying to figure out somebody's faith, you look at believe, belong, behave. Those are the three big ones, right? And there are complex relationships between these. Some people think first you believe, first you belong, then you believe, and some people say, no, first you behave, then you belong. So that's an open thing. But here's what's interesting. If in fact those three things are part of the cocktail of religious identity, then we've got to complexify this nuns stuff a little bit. Because, of course, some people are nuns because they don't believe it. Some people are nuns because they don't act like Christians. They don't want to act like church people. The Fuller research calls that the Jesus jacket, with freshmen in college are very likely to wear a Jesus jacket where they think of Christianity as behavior. This is very common in evangelical circles, right? And so, but if it's the jacket, they just take it off when they don't want to behave as Christians. So, and then they'll put it back on for Sunday morning, right? And of course, some people are, and the vast majority of people who they don't want to really act like Christians, as you can see. Maybe I'll believe, maybe I'll belong, but I just don't want to act like those people, And then, 10% don't belong to a religious community. You put those all together and you come up with those numbers in the middle. This is a more complex way of rendering that nuns data, right? So sometimes it's how you behave, sometimes it's whether you belong to something, and sometimes, as you can see, actually not too often, it has to do with what you believe, which helps explain the conundrum of some of this research. You've got all these people who are nuns that say they don't belong to anything, they don't have faith, but they pray. And you're like, well, to who? To what? It could be that they're nuns, but not in the believing circle. Okay. So I think Lady Gaga is a really good example of this. Okay? So what's happening is these circles are moving apart from each other. The intersection is becoming. So Lady Gaga, if you know anything about her, she considers herself, and by all observation seems to be, a religious human being. She is a practicing Catholic. She went to Catholic schools, Catholic parish. She's got a relationship with her local priest. I mean, she's the real deal when it comes to going to church as a Catholic, okay? So this was how she was raised, and it matters to her. So let's call that her religious identity. She got that from her upbringing. Her religious practices are a little more out there, right? Yes, she prays, she worships, and she also schedules her tour dates based on astrological charts, right? So she's importing religious practices from all over the place, not just from her local parish, right? And then her religious beliefs also are informed by all sorts of places, not just her religious upbringing. Some of it is, but she says, I hope, this is just one, a random article I found. I hope I'm teaching people to worship themselves. Now my bet is her priest would be a little, sorry to hear her say that, maybe, but she is also very much part of the self-empowerment movement, right? So what's happening here? Okay, I thought I was getting cool here. It turned out not to work quite the way I wanted it to. Anyway, these things are all falling apart. Well, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, they're all apart from each other now, right? I can't explain all of that innovation. Okay, so the question now is, what is our job, right? As youth pastors, as Christian leaders, is our job to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, right? Are we trying to bring these circles together? My theological training said, yes, that was our job. We want this to be an integrated kind of identity that holds together, you know? But it does make me wonder whether we have limited what that looks like. So maybe, what is all that? Maybe our job is to draw a bigger circle. So there might be more ways of embracing this new understanding of what it looks like to be a religious human than what the surveys are showing, what the National Study of Youth and Religion showed, or even what some of the Springtide research shows. So anyway, if we are drawing, I don't know what that does. Okay. So here's a question. If the ship has already fallen apart, it kind of feels like we're a little late on the game, right? The horse is out of the barn. What are we supposed to do? How do we stop this? What is our job in this? So we're going to go to a second scriptural metaphor here. I don't know, who can see that? Do you mind reading it?
Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus. Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. Rather it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was.
Okay, so the first thing we know is that it looks likely that, Lazarus is clearly gravely ill, right? And Jesus chooses to just wait it out, right? And so the second thing that happens is, Peter, you want to continue?
Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how we loved him?
So by the time Jesus gets there, Lazarus is not only dead, but he's buried. He's in the tomb, right? He's been there for 3 or 4 days. And so to the point where, it worries people about the smell. And so the ship has broken apart. The damage is done. So what is our role now in that case? And Peter, go ahead and continue the passage.
Jesus cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth.
Right, so first people are looking on going, oh, this is this beautiful, tender scene, how he loved this guy, they're all caught up in the grief of it. And then Jesus goes crazy. Hey, Lazarus, out of there. And so, what is beyond their capacity to imagine is what God does. God is the innovator here. God is doing the new thing. Not the people standing around. The people standing around are offering all sorts of, sympathy, but God is the one providing new life. That's important for us as we talk about this innovation conversation. Very little of what we ever do is going to be new. Only God really can do the new thing. Ad novum, as Molman talks about it. So, it's we are jumping on board with God's new thing because Jesus is not content to let those witnesses, see the crowd, right? The crowd, they are witnesses to the power of God. They've seen it happen. They can't explain it, but it is real to them. That's the church, y'all. We can't explain what God is doing, but we have become convinced in some ways it is real. Not everybody in the pews would say that, but most of us who are leaders would say that, right? It's real, and we are the bystanders who are witnessing God's life-giving power at work. We have seen God's life-giving power happen in some way, and Jesus gives us a job. And so, Peter, go ahead and finish it up.
Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go."
So that's the church's job. God does the innovation, we mop up, right? God does the innovation, calls people to new life, calls young people to this new life that God has promised them. And our job is to unbind them as they stumble their way towards it. Because there are still things that are holding them back. So God is the innovator, the author of new life, but God gives us this role to play, to unbind the youth that Christ has called out of their tombs.